Need the presentation? Okay. Yeah, it's okay. Survival of the fittest. Struggle for existence. Red in tooth and claw. You have probably heard these expressions before, likely in connection with one of the most famous concepts in evolution, natural selection. According to the theory of evolution, natural selection, along with the violence and selfishness commonly attributed to it, are not only an accurate description of the natural world, but also the source of all biodiversity and the engine that keeps nature constantly changing and properly working. In contrast, for the Bible believer, the impressive array of life that we see in nature did not arise from chance, fight, and death. On the contrary, each element of the exuberant canvas of planet Earth was carefully designed, and it was good. And the whole was much more than the sum of its parts. At the sunset of the sixth day of creation week, God saw all that He made, and it was very good. God did not just design beautifully made animals and plants. He designed the entire system based on peaceful interactions and fruitful cooperation between all organisms, large and small. There was no shortage of resources, and no suffering was attached to the act of feeding. Plants provided food for people and for all the animals, but they benefited from the relationship as well. While eating from their flowers and fruits, animals helped plants to reproduce by transporting their pollen and seeds away. The environment, animals, and plants were interconnected in many ways. Yesterday evening, Dr. Susie Phillips told us about the magnificent solar panels of plants. The process of photosynthesis is extremely complex, but it can be summarized saying that plants grow themselves with water, air, and sunlight. Surprisingly, the component of air that they intake, carbon dioxide, is precisely the waste product of our breathing process, and the waste product of plant photosynthesis is oxygen, the exact gas that we need to survive. Isn't that amazing? Yet, when we look at nature today, we do not always see that idyllic setting that I am describing. There is fighting and predation, illness, plagues, suffering, and death. The prevalence of all these calamities in our planet have been used by some to question the very existence of God. And even worse, to question His all-powerful and all-loving nature. But the Bible has an answer to this as well, an answer that has nothing to do with God's character or intentions, but with human decisions. We know the exact moment when the balance was broken, when God's perfect system of cooperation and mutual benefit was replaced by another based on distrust and self-preservation. The consequences came swiftly. God Himself told Adam and Eve that their decision would severely affect animals, plants, and human life. From that very moment, God's original intent for the planet began to blur, and we started seeing a mixture of confusing features. Is it possible, after several thousand years of sin, to still find significant clues of that original system in our decayed Earth? I say it is. In the first chapter of her book, Steps to Christ, Ellen White wrote that even amid the suffering brought about by sin, God's love is still revealed in nature. I agree. I am a biologist, and my field of expertise is animal behavior. So I try to find clues of God's character in the ways animals interact with each other. In the last decades, there have been huge advances in the field of animal behavior, especially on the topics of animal cognition, animal emotions, and animal morality. Most of the recent research has focused on social animals with high cognitive abilities, such as apes, wolves, elephants, and dolphins, although some studies have been done with smaller animals, such as rats and mice. Hundreds of studies, both in the wild and in the lab, have shown astonishing abilities in many animals, such as building and using tools, solving complex problems without the use of trial and error, and even planning for the future. In the area of animal emotions, scientists have discovered that many social animals have rich emotional lives. A few years ago, the world-renowned primatologist Franz Duval wrote a book entitled The Age of Empathy. In this book, he defends the idea that the social life of animals in the wild is not ruled by natural selection, competition, and selfishness. In contrast, he presents more than 100 examples of cooperation, kindness, and generosity among animals. And look how interesting. He affirms that both humans and animals are pre-programmed to feel empathy. Empathy is the ability to share someone else's feelings or experiences by imagining what it would be like to be in that person's situation. Are animals really capable of doing that? Can they really imagine what it is to be in the shoes of another being? In 2011, a team of scientists at the University of Chicago published a research study they did to test if rats were able to feel empathy. The researchers put pairs of rats in cages together. One of the rats was restrained in a clear tube, the door of which could only be opened from the outside, and the other rat was free to move around. The free rat explored the tube and learned how to open the door to release its companion. But it wouldn't if the tube was empty or it contained a toy rat. In a second version of the experiments, there were two tubes inside the cage, one containing a rat and the other containing chocolate chips. The free rat was expected to go first for the sweet treat and eat it by itself, but instead, it opened both containers and shared the chocolate chips. Dr. Peggy Mason, one of the researchers, said the following: "All of this tells us that acting on empathic feelings to help another in need is a biological and, in fact, a neurobiological mandate. It's in our brain." Interesting statement, right? Empathy, the capacity to feel for others and the drive to help them, seems to be ingrained in the brain of even simple animals such as rats. Compassionate empathy is found in animals large and small, and not only in artificial environments, but in the wild as well. The research team of the Amboseli Trust for Elephants have been studying wild populations of elephants in southern Kenya for more than 40 years, and they have recorded hundreds of episodes when the elephants showed empathic behaviors. They saw female elephants helping babies that fell into ditches by pulling or pushing them and even digging the sides with their tusks to reduce the stiffness. On one occasion, one male was observed pulling a tranquilizing dart out of another male, dropping it on the ground, and touching where the dart was. This shows a profound understanding of the situation. The helper elephant seemed to know that the dart was painful, and he tried to soothe the discomfort by touching the wound gently. Empathy and altruism are related concepts. You know that altruism is caring about others and helping them without expecting anything in return. Well, to test if chimpanzees were altruistic, if they would consciously decide to act altruistically towards others, the research team of Dr. Franz Duval performed an interesting experiment at the Yerkes National Primate Research Center in Emory University. 2 chimpanzees were placed in 2 adjacent cages, separated by a wire mesh so they could see and hear each other. And one of them was trained to give a token to one of the researchers in exchange for food. The team could choose between tokens of 2 different colors. If he chose the red token, that was the selfish choice, he received food and the partner received nothing. If he chose the green token, the altruistic choice, then he received food and the partner received food as well. This graph shows the results of the experiment. The horizontal line is 50%, the expected average if they were choosing colors randomly. Anything above the line is a preference for green. So as you can see, most of the time there is a significant bias towards choosing green. The columns represent different trials of the experiment. The first shows times when the partner was inactive, just sitting there. The second shows when the partner was actively calling for attention and asking for food. And the third shows what happened when the partner became aggressive. A little punishment there. The last column is very important because it is the control trial when there was no partner. The drop in the choice for green here shows that they knew what they were doing. They chose to feed the partner except when there was no partner. Although quite simple for human standards, this experiment shows that chimpanzees pass the altruism test. They help others without expecting anything in return. Yet, someone could say, real altruism takes an effort, and here there is no differential effort involved in handing one or other token. That is true. The design of experiments for animal behavior research, it is a tricky business. In order to obtain significant results, you have to reduce your variables to the minimum, and sometimes that produces very unrealistic settings. But chimpanzees have shown to be empathic and capable of truly altruistic acts in real life. Living in the same research center where this experiment took place, there is a colony of chimpanzees under almost continuous observation. One of the old females, called Peony, has arthritis, so she has problems walking and climbing. When the group meets together in a high platform for a grooming session, the young females help Peony to climb to the platform by pushing her from the back. And they also go back and forth to the water fountain and bring water in their mouths and give it to Peony so she doesn't have to walk all the way to the fountain, which is at the end of the enclosure. Another example of tremendous care in chimpanzees was reported by Japanese researchers studying a wild population in Tanzania. A mother and her older daughter took care of a severely disabled little sister with a spinal damage that could not walk or sit up on her own. The 2 adults shared the responsibility for taking care, transporting, and feeding her, and managed to keep her alive for almost 2 years. Rats, elephants, and chimpanzees are just a few examples, but many other species show behaviors of empathy and care for the members of their family or social groups. What about outsiders? Do animals care for others that are not their own? These types of behaviors are more difficult to observe in the wild, but some reports exist of caring behavior between different types of animals. There is a National Geographic documentary entitled Eye of the Leopard that portrays a young female leopard that, after killing a baboon, found a small baby baboon clinging from its fur and took care of him for several hours, transporting, grooming, and protecting him from other predators, just as if it were her own cub. Some scientists have explained that episode as an anomaly, a mistake of the leopard that misdirected her motherly instincts. But what if there was no mistake? What if that was just the original universal empathy engraved in the brain of the leopard that in those specific circumstances overcame the after-scene predatory instincts? Another scientifically documented example is a bottlenose dolphin mom that adopted a calf of a different species, a melon-headed whale. The female was observed in the coastal waters of French Polynesia swimming together with the adoptive son, nursing him in several occasions, and taking care of him for 3 years. The observation was described as a rare phenomenon because biologists who believe that natural selection rules the world find no sense in animals investing time and resources helping others that are not biologically related with them. I see it differently. For me, empathy, altruism, and selfless care for others is what should be expected of all God's creatures, at least in the original plan. I think these behaviors are hints of what once was, evidence of the universal love and care that once ruled the world. When we look at nature from a biblical perspective, trusting that the Bible tells us the truth about the origin of life, we find much evidence that aligns perfectly with the Genesis story. As any work of art, creation reflects the Creator attributes. When God created humans, He made them in His image, but the rest of creation was made under the same principles of love, wisdom, and beauty. Think of a talented painter who painted all types of paintings. In a self-portrait, we find a lot of information about the author because it looks like him, but actually it is a very incomplete representation because it is just a flat, static image of a much more complex reality, the person. Each of the rest of the paintings, with their own details and views, help us to know the author a little better, because all of them capture a bit of his essence. God's essence is love, and that love was to be reflected in each of his creatures. Each in its own level, animals were designed to show the loving character of God, and humans were intended to convey the most complete representation of that love. Then we spoiled the portrait, and with it, the rest of the paintings. But God did not give up. He had already found a solution, and the solution was, once again, love. Empathic, compassionate, selfless love. It makes sense that 6,000 years of sin were not able to erase love from the behavior of animals, because love cannot be quenched or swept away, because love is the greatest virtue, and because without love, we are nothing. We are talking about science and the Bible, so I would like to finish with a short experiment that illustrates the effect of violence in contrast with the effect of love. Thank you. In this container, I have a chemical substance that my chemist friends would call a non-Newtonian liquid. I call it the living-like mixture because although it is not alive, it behaves, it reacts as a living being. Let me show you. As I pour it, you can see that it is a liquid, a dense liquid with the consistency of paint or honey, but still a liquid. Okay. I can put my hand inside, and I can reach the bottom of the container. But this is because I am treating this substance gently, with love and care. But what happens if we treat it with violence? Let's see. It hardens automatically, and I cannot get past the surface. When we treat people or animals with harshness and violence, we will never be able to reach their hearts or to see their true nature. Love, in contrast, can melt armors and turn walls into breaches. As we have seen, love is still engraved in nature, and it is at the center of God's self-revelation, the Bible. The same Bible that tells us that God is love tells us that Jesus is coming. Soon, there will be no more mixture of features, no more confusing messages, because God will remove violence, suffering, and death forever. In the beginning, there was love, and very soon, there will be love again. Pure, unselfish, absolute love, because the God of love will dwell with his people, and we will be his people, and he will be our God. Don't you want to be a messenger of such good news to a suffering world that is longing for love? I am Noemi Duran, animal biologist, and I trust the Bible. Remember, Jesus is coming. Trust his word. Amen.